What is home environmental medicine? Why should you care? Watch today's episode and find out. Okay, I want to introduce a new paradigm of the healthcare industry I call home environmental medicine. Home environmental medicine is basically when you have an indoor environment, there is activity in that space that is visible and invisible that will affect the chemical releases in your brain that will either cause stress in the body or eliminate stress in the body. So home environmental medicine is an application that I created so that I can actually use the physical space of a person's home to relieve stress triggers in the brain and help them to recover. One of my main focuses of interest in home recovery is the bedroom. If a person does not get a good night's sleep and they don't go into REM phase of sleep, the body will not recover. So my general focus is on what are the hindrances to a person actually falling into sleep and sleeping through the night. One of the factors could be, for example, particulate matter, otherwise known as dust. Dust can impede your respiratory system. It can cause nose runs. It could cause coughing and gagging. And these things can be a hindrance to your ability to actually sleep, even though you may not be aware of it. Once an air purification process has been taken place, you will notice a difference in your ability to breathe and also in your ability to sleep. Light wave energy is vital to the function of the immune system and also vital to the function of the human brain. And there can be disruptors to the light access that you can get inside your home. So for example, if you have dirty windows, your windows haven't been cleaned, what it does is it actually blocks some of the light from entering into your home. There's a syndrome called SAD. It's seasonal affective disorder, which actually is caused by lack of sunlight exposure, specifically ultraviolet light, which actually governs the immune system and all of the circulatory systems in the body. So if you deprive a person of that actual wave light of energy, you will actually impede their progress and their opportunity to actually recover. So light wave frequency is very important, and the reason why intensive cleaning is vital to home environmental medicine is because particulate matter can actually cover surfaces that can bounce light and reflect light. So if you have, for example, a home that has not been cleaned for maybe 20 days or maybe 20 years, you're going to have accumulation of particulate matter that's going to cover the surfaces that light needs to bounce off of or light needs to transmit through. Another thing that you want to consider with home environmental medicine is the usage of poisons in the house. These poisons will produce a residual dust that will actually remain in the house. And so if you spray for ants or you spray for roaches, you spray for spiders, you have to at some point address the poison that is now part of your air. So when we look at particles in your home that may come from tobacco products, it may be coming from pesticides. These things are not supposed to be inside of your body, and once they enter in your body, there's no guarantee that the filters in your system are going to be able to eliminate them. Now, when we talk about filters in home environmental medicine, many of us have filters on our air handling systems, and we change those filters regularly because we know that they're trapping particles that are floating in the dust. Our human lungs, and we have cilia in our neck and also dust hairs, should I say hairs in our nose, they act as filters to the dust, but there are also particles in our environment that can actually bypass those filters. And when we talk about fine particulate matter, the tinier the particles are, the more dangerous they are to your body because oftentimes they can bypass the filters and end up damaging your cells. So if the particles are small enough to float in the air and you breathe them in, they enter into your bloodstream, they can translocate to any part of your body, and that's going to cause cancer. What will happen is the cells that surround that particular organ where that particle is will start to die as a result of this particle being there. Now, it could be a particle that may be non-toxic. It can also be a particle that is very toxic, which is, as I would call, a double whammy. So you have situations where you have particles that can be airborne that are not toxic, but they can get stuck in the body and cause damage. In this episode, we just scratched the surface of some of the things I'll be covering in this series. And if you're a person who is providing care for a loved one in their home, there's a lot of things that are being missed that are actually impacting their health and their ability to live a happy, healthy life inside their home. I'm the incredible Gregory Hunter, and I can't wait to help you live an incredible life. This is not maid service, this is intensive cleaning. So reach out to us with the information below, and we'd be glad to help you. You're caring for your loved one, but who's caring for you? Let's talk about it in today's episode. What I've found to be the case in most families is that at some point in time there's somebody in your home to be cared for. It could be the grandmom, it could be great uncle, it could be maybe a child with special needs. But at some point, each one of us will either be giving care or will need care. And it's a daunting task, and it also comes with a lot of stress, and it also comes with a lot of heartache. There are families in many communities who they try to handle it all on their own, which makes this challenge even greater for them because they're not aware oftentimes that there are services that are available. And then secondly, they are not aware of the things that need to be done because they're not professional caregivers, so they don't have access or the knowledge that they would get from a professional trained caregiver. So some of the people I've seen, which is basically really struck a nerve with me, was a 14-year-old girl whose mother was a diabetic and she was dying from the disease and she was wheelchair bound, and it was just a 14-year-old daughter, and she dropped out of high school and she's coming home and not going to school. She's just taking care of her mother all day and she doesn't really know what to do. She's not a healthcare professional, so she's managing as well as she can. But they had another problem because the mother was divorced. They were living in squalor. The home was absolutely filthy, and they had a guard dog, which was a large German Shepherd, and the dog was having run of the house. He was defecating all throughout the house. This is a situation where this family is in one crisis and they're also creating another crisis, and they're not aware. I've seen that in more than one case where there's a family member who's doing the best that they can with the resources that they are aware of or the resources that they have, and they're really being challenged and in some cases traumatized. They're overwhelmed with trying to do the best that they can to care. And the last thing that actually gets done is the cleaning. The home actually doesn't get done. So when the person feels overwhelmed, things just fall off the radar. Sometimes there's dementia that comes into our families, and sometimes there are other diseases that will impair a person's judgment, impair their sensibilities. This becomes a level of stress for a person who's a family member who's doing the best that they know how, but they don't have any training in those medical diseases. There's many aspects to dementia. It takes a person who's skilled and trained in those areas to even identify when it is that your loved one doesn't no longer recognize who you are and thinks that you're an intruder in their home and that you're handling them, you're touching them. So what doesn't happen in these environments is that the house doesn't get cleaned. These are types of things that will wear a family member who's providing care for a loved one. It will wear you out totally and completely to the point where now you're not thinking properly, you're making bad decisions because the stress is wearing out your ability to think clear. And the environmental hazards that accumulate are going to exacerbate the trauma that you're having, and more likely you're going to find yourself in the hospital needing care while you're trying to provide care. I tell people, well, if you get your house intensively cleaned, it doesn't have to be intensively cleaned every day. So these are some of the challenges that caregivers who are non-professionals are facing, but at the same time, when a caregiver who is a professional goes into a home, say for example you're a social worker, you don't have a track record of any of the activity that preceded your coming to that home. So if there's hoarding activities going on and they had exterminations come in the past, you don't have any record of that. So when you're walking into that environment, you have a lot to consider. So caregivers have to be mindful that they are vulnerable to be a stroke candidate if they're caring for a loved one and the house is not being cleaned, because you're accumulating toxins, you're accumulating dust particles, and if they don't get addressed, they're going to show up somewhere in your health because they're showing up in your body. They're going to be in your lungs, it's going to be in your blood, it's going to be in your nose. And so these are some of the issues that caregivers have when they're trying to care for a loved one. So if you're in this kind of situation and you're not the only one, here's the thing to think about. There's a service that's available, we provide it. Reach out to us and let us know that you need the service, you need an inspection. We'll show up pronto to take care of you, to keep you safe and keep your family safe. This is not maid service, this is intensive cleaning. So reach out to us with the information below and we'd be glad to help you. What's the difference between intensive cleaning and maid service? Find out on today's episode. Okay, just recently I got a phone call from a maid service company because they had a job that they could not fulfill. Basically what happened was there was a fire in the house. The fire was in the basement. The fire in the basement distributed soot and smoke through the entire of the house to the degree that the lady who was the owner who lived there, she had to check into a hotel for 3 months because she couldn't tolerate the smell. When they called the maid service, they said, well, we can't accommodate you because we don't do that kind of work. Intensive cleaning addresses the microscopic aspects of the cleaning process where we're dealing not with just what is visual and pleasing, we're dealing with what is environmental and often off the radar, such as germ activity and microorganisms and their behaviors. So when we're dealing with the soot in the home, we deal with particulate matter that has been distributed throughout the entire house, which means that there's a certain percentage of the smoke or soot that is now stuck to the ceilings, is stuck to the walls, even though it may not be visible. When you walk throughout the house, everywhere you go is smoke. As I went into the basement was where the fire happened, and they wanted the 2 upper levels cleaned first, so I suggested that first we're going to have to create a barrier between the basement door and the rest of the house so that you don't get the drift, because the air in your home moves throughout the home, and that's basically how it functions. So he had the suggestion that, well, maybe we can just in the basement poke some holes, like he said, like a 1-inch holes in a couple of the windows, and just let the air freshen up the space. So I grabbed the man and I took him over to a mirror. He and I stood in the mirror and we couldn't see ourselves. I said, the reason why you can't see yourself in the mirror is because it's covered with soot. Now, when the fire took place in the basement, the soot didn't go only to the mirror, it got distributed liberally through the entire house. So anywhere that your nose is detecting the odor of smoke, guess what? There are smoke particles. That's what you're smelling. So when you open the windows and open the doors and think you're airing out, it's the same with people who smoke cigarettes. The reason why the smell doesn't go away because the particles are sticking to the surfaces. So maid service doesn't really address broad surface cleaning such as ceilings, walls, and maybe they will address the floor. But if there has been a fire or smoke event or just accumulation of dust, the dust will layer the entire interior surface. If your neighbor's house caught fire, guess what? You need to purify the rooms in your house because the glues from the materials that were burnt next door are now in your house. And as I said earlier, if it's in your house, it's in your blood. If it's in your blood, it's going to get distributed to all of the organs in your body. And so intensive cleaning focuses on all of the areas that encompass and go beyond what the maid services will do. So the maid service, they will dust and vacuum and do some touch-up, but they won't necessarily pull the refrigerator out from the wall and see that it's never been cleaned back there since you moved in, and it's got accumulation of all types of stuff that's releasing odors. They also will not get inside of the cabinets in the kitchen where oftentimes if there's an infestation, ants or roaches or even bed bugs. As you can see, there's a big difference between maid service and intensive cleaning. As a matter of fact, the maid service companies call my services because they cannot do these jobs. They reject these jobs. It's beyond their skill set. It's beyond the scope of their responsibilities and their training. We do it with pleasure. We do it with expertise. So you don't have to feel that there's no solution and that maybe you call the maid service and they've rejected it, so you have to handle it on your own. It's not going to be doable because you're not aware and you don't have the adequate tools or the information that you need to get this home to be a safe environment. I'm the incredible Gregory Hunter, and I cannot wait to make your home incredibly clean. This is not maid service, this is intensive cleaning. So reach out to us with the information below, and we'd be glad to help you.